Hello and welcome back to NoBS. Today we turn to talking about L'Oreal, the makeup and beauty line and company that's gotten into a little bit of trouble recently. They've been proven to be very biased and trying to get woke in light of all these current events. We of course know that the country has been in chaos ever since that fateful day back in Minneapolis about 2 or so weeks ago. Ever since then, things have been going crazy. There's been demonstrations and wild and craziness in all kinds of liberal led cities and all kinds of places across the country. In addition, the PC police has come out and they've started to kind of lock down and call out things that they deem not politically correct anymore, things they think are offensive, like how they've tried to stop these TV shows based on police officers because, of course, the police have all been vilified and turned into these villains, even though they're really not. They're not as racist or biased as people claim. And then, in addition to that, lots of so-called racism has been trying to get called out, specifically things having to do with like the past, like Gone with the Wind was taken off of HBO Max. There was a band that had to change their name, Lady Antebellum, which was because the Antebellum name is referencing times before the Civil War. So things like that have been going down. And in addition, these big mega corporations and companies have tried to chime in too. We've seen it in a lot of different ways. We've seen them all post their little black squares with little text in there trying to support the causes, support Black Lives Matter and stuff like that. And today we have a similar story, but a bit of a different presentation. We're past those black squares. Now we're talking about L'Oreal speaking out, and specifically they're going after a certain kind of people. They don't seem to like white people very much, as you'll see by these quotes we're about to go over. And in addition, they're rehiring a former model that been fired a couple years ago because she was so anti-white. She hated white people so much they had to fire her. And we're going to talk about that soon, go over the story, the quotes, and all this details very quickly. But first, let's take a quick moment to check out our sponsor. As we've seen, there's been riots and chaos in the streets, and some places are forced to close and board up, and you can't get food in some parts of town. Well, we have a solution, and it's coming from preparewithnobs.com. My Patriot Supply has provided NoBS with an excellent option for some dry storage food. This food is really delicious, it's really affordable, and it can live on your shelf for many years. So you can always save it and have it in case of an emergency. And right now we've seen many emergencies happening and popping up across the country and throughout the world. So buying some long-term emergency storage food is really a must. And if you join today and check out the link, Prepare with NoBS, well, you can also save $100 instantly. So go to preparewithnobs.com, save $100 today, and also support the show while you do it. Thanks for your time. Now, back to today's episode. Great, now that that's out of the way, let's get back to the L'Oreal story. L'Oreal has recently been caught bashing white people, basically. As you can see by this quotes, this is a series of quotes collected on the Fox News channel, I believe. And these are actually, yes, these are quotes from the model. So this is the model that we're talking about. This is L'Oreal's message to white people. This is the model that they rehired. And we'll get to more specifics about them soon. But first, let's just talk about the quotes. First, it says, "Your existence, privilege, and success as a race is built on the backs, blood, and death of people of color. Your entire existence is drenched in racism." So this is address from Monroe Bergdorf. That's the model that was rehired. And then they're addressing white people, basically saying we're all racist, we're all the worst. And this is the kind of stuff that got them fired. And what I find interesting about this story is just 3 years later, and now this stuff is okay, apparently. I don't know if they're trying to just reclaim the whole narrative or just forget this stuff happened, these quotes happened, but it's like this person got fired in 2017. We actually did a video on it at the time, and we talked about how Monroe was very biased and it was just a bad look. Why would L'Oreal want to keep this very racist person on their payroll? In addition, L'Oreal is, of course, a company founded by white people. It's run by, I believe, Europeans. I believe it's from France. So why would the company want to keep someone on a payroll that hates the people that own the company and run it? It doesn't make sense. You know, it's like criticizing another group of people, like say you're criticizing Mormons really bad, and you happen to work for the Mormon church. That wouldn't make sense, and neither does this make sense. So that's why we're talking about it, and we're going over the quotes. Here's the next one. "Racism isn't learned. It's inherited and consciously or unconsciously passed down through privilege." So this is actually kind of getting even worse. It's like you can't even help being racist. It's basically saying white people are born racist. Like, this is insane. This is like, that's a very racist thing to say. That's what's ironic too, is these claims, these quotes are what's really racist. Like, saying someone is inherently anything is supposed to be racist. Like, people try to put that as an attack on other people sometimes, like, oh, if you're saying this is inherent about a certain other race, like, okay, for example, a stereotype. This is like a stereotype for Asian people, that Asian people are either good at math or they're bad at driving. That's not necessarily true, but there is some kind of facts supporting it. Like, stereotypes come from evidence, so it's been supported in the hearsay and in the sort of anecdotal evidence. But to say that generally and just really believe it, I mean, that's still at the core kind of racist. It's not the worst thing in the world, surely, and no one's really caring about like this kind of thing. This is just an example, but in this case, I mean, we're really getting deep into it. We're saying, this person, Monroe, says white people built their whole society on the backs of people of color. Their existence is racism. They're born racist. It's passed down through privilege. And then finally, it says, once white people begin to admit that their race is the most violent and oppressive force of nature on earth, then we can talk. So another very scary quote from someone who was just rehired by this company. And again, this story has legs. It's interesting because they were fired 3 years ago for saying these things, and now they're being brought back in the middle of this panic, in the middle of this controversy. Also, this controversy, let's remember, this is all because of the election year. Like, this stuff pops up about every 2 years because there's elections and then midterms and then presidential election and midterms. They always pop up around this time. It's not just a coincidence that BLM just came back after basically disappearing since 2016. So this is part of it. This is L'Oreal way of kind of virtue signaling, bringing back this actress, this model rather. And it's very interesting when you get more into it because there's actually more of a backstory to this model too. And what part of it that was interesting was the fact that they're an alphabet model. So this details are coming in this article. It says, Monroe Bergdorf rehired at L'Oreal 3 years after being fired over white supremacy comments. Bergdorf made history in 2017 when she was hired as the face of L'Oreal UK campaign, making her the brand's first transgender model. So we have a T model, a alphabet person, and now they're getting special treatment because, they have this sort of identity and they're fitting in at the right time. 2017 was an election year, so they actually faced some backlash, but now that it's back and it's 2020, it's time to kind of just, let it go. Let's read into the article and see what else they have to say. L'Oreal Paris has rehired Monroe Bergdorf after the model called the company's recent BLM Instagram post hypocritical and a form of gaslighting. You dropped me from a campaign in 2017 and threw me to the wolves for speaking about racism and white supremacy, Bergdorf wrote in her own post last Tuesday. I said just yesterday that it would only be a matter of time before racist brands saw a window of PR opportunity to jump on the bandwagon. I'm disgusted in writing this in floods of tears and shaking. So this to me shows it's not a serious person, not really a stable person. Like, they are literally saying they can't handle this situation. Like, this is bad for them. They can't even talk. They're tearing up and crying and shaking. So this is not a person that's in control. They're not a person that we should really listen to and take advice from. I really doubt they suffered from all this kinds of racism that they're claiming. Like, this is a model that's rich and pampered, living in the UK, like living in the present. Like, we're not in the past. We're not 100 years ago. We're not 200 years ago back in the day. Like, this is 2020. And really, they're getting exposed as being racist, and they're saying they're the victim. So it's kind of like that whole meme where someone is attacking you and then they cringe like they're getting attacked, like they act like they're the victim as they lash out at you. I mean, they're the person that said these horrible things about white people for almost no reason, just kind of exposing their own bias and their own hatred for a race. And they have obviously put this broad stroke and said that all of these people of this race are bad, which is just the worst thing you could do. I mean, if anyone said this about their race, it would obviously be offensive, but they can do it to white people openly and freely. And in fact, despite them getting fired about 3 years for saying this, now they're getting brought back, which just goes to show, I mean, there's just so much crazy anti-white rhetoric out there. Bergdorf made history in 2017 when she was hired as the face of L'Oreal UK campaign, making her the brand's first transgender model. However, she was fired shortly after when the Daily Mail published a Facebook post she wrote denouncing racism after a rally in Virginia left one person dead and 19 others injured. In her post, Bergdorf said that white people must admit their race is the most violent and oppressive force of nature on earth. We're the most violent. Well, the crime stats in the actual data doesn't seem to agree with that. I know that they want to pretend this is true and they want to, vilify the people they don't like, but sometimes you just don't like someone or a group. And, I'm not saying that's cool. Like everyone should try and be open, but it happens. And it's definitely more common than most admit. And, the problem is, though, these people might have their reasons, and I'm sure they're justified in their minds. Like every racist has a reason, they have excuses. But the greater point is, just because you don't like someone, it doesn't mean they're a villain. It doesn't mean they're just like the worst person in the world. Just because you disagree or you don't like this kind of people, it doesn't mean they're actually wrong. You can actually just not like someone because of your own personal reasons or preferences or biases, and that's not necessarily wrong. But the fact that they try and vilify these people and, go after all white people, which is exactly what this next quote says. So let's get to that part. Honestly, I don't have energy to talk about the racial violence of white people anymore. Yes, all white people, Bergdorf wrote in a post, because most of y'all don't even realize or refuse to acknowledge that your existence, privilege, and success as a race is built on the backs of blood and death of people of color. Your entire existence is drenched in racism, from microaggressions to terrorism. You guys built the blueprint for this. Okay. Just more nonsense, more just over exaggeration, like totally trying to vilify white people just for existing. And the other thing, and I hate to admit it, it's a couple of things actually. This comes from jealousy. This comes from a group, a minority that is just not comfortable in a majority country. They don't want to be the minority. They can't stand seeing lots of other people succeeding too. So there's a lot of successful people that they're seeing. They're seeing that, white people have great careers, lives, all this stuff, and they're jealous of it. So they want to blame it on racism, and they want to say, hey, you didn't get that fairly. You got that because of bad things you did. When really it's like, first of all, the people in the present, you can't blame them for the sins of our fathers. You can't go back in history and bring up these random racist events that aren't even close to happening now. And on top of that, I mean, most of these things, like they built it off of the blood and backs of minorities. Well, most of the time that's highly exaggerated too. And it just is not based in reality. I mean, people built their own countries. Americans built this country. We fought the Revolutionary War, won our freedom from Britain. We built all these cities across the nation. We've added all these states and collaborated with other nations like Canada and Mexico. We had wars with them. We fought for everything. I mean, the idea that this was all built by people of color is just really radical, really not true. It's like a rewriting of history. Now, we can admit that in the South, there were small sections that certainly had black workers, like indentured servants, slavery, and that's messed up. And especially if you consider it with these modern sensibilities, like obviously that was a bad thing, but that didn't build the whole country. There's really, and as far as the numbers and stuff, it wasn't the biggest number. It was just a few places in the South, the southern states, like not even all of them had like big economies based on that kind of labor. And to say that they built everything, I mean, it's like they didn't build New York City, they didn't build Washington, D.C. I know they didn't build, like, I think some people will say they built the White House or something, but it's just not true. It's not the best way to represent things, and it's really biased. And it goes to show that this company and this person are just very, very negative and very anti-white, and they're getting wrapped up in this whole race baiting controversy that's been going on for weeks now. That about wraps things up. I hope you guys enjoyed today's video. Make sure you comment your thoughts on everything below. Tell me what you think about L'Oreal. Tell me what you think about them rehiring this model. And also tell me what you think about this video and its new presentation style. I also want you to hit the like button if you get a chance. Help us get shared. And until next time, you guys have a great day.